Hello. So today I have the honor of interviewing Mr. James Johnson, who is a part of a remarkable family, the Edwards family. We are going to learn about their contributions to Oklahoma City and the development and business growth in the Black community. So help me in welcoming James Johnson. Yay!
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here with you.
I want to first talk about your family and who they are. Mainly, I think it's your grandfather. Am I right?
That is correct.
And
My grandparents, my grandmother and my grandfather.
listen, you better put that woman up there with him. That's right. I love that. The Edwards background as business people, and then the junkyard to entrepreneur roadmap that they took.
Well, the story actually starts for my grandfather in northern Mississippi and for my grandmother, near the plantations of South Carolina. They were born in 1892 and 1898, respectively. Though they did not meet until 1930, they both had somewhat of an exposure to business and entrepreneurship prior to that time. My grandfather, Walter J. Edwards, himself, migrated with his father and other siblings to Oklahoma in 1907. And they came from very harsh conditions that were present in Mississippi. 1907 was the year that Oklahoma became a state. And so prior to the time that they got here before the articles of incorporation were accepted into the Union, and they landed in a place called Wellston, Oklahoma, somewhat up in the center of Oklahoma. And worked and toiled there for a while. They were sharecroppers. They had worked in fields. They had done this part of work. But as the agricultural society was waning down, those jobs and those opportunities and those remunerations were less and less and less. And it drove my grandfather, his siblings, and many others across this land to bigger cities for their future.
That's awesome. And so he ended up here in Oklahoma City. And you're right, there's migration to the city during that time because that sharecropping, those avenues to do that kind of dwindled down. So when he got to Oklahoma City, what was his first business?
I don't want to start with his first business. I want to start with his first job. Because he was a handyman with inside of a scrap yard, what others would call a junkyard, and he worked for less than $10 a week. He was just trying to make ends meet. But my grandfather was very astute. What some would say, very streetwise. He wasn't no farther than the fifth grade in the school as far as an education is concerned. So he was a self-made, self-learned man. And so he saw what was going on in the business. He learned that. And he, worked like heck to make himself valuable to that business, thinking and knowing all the time that there is a future for me in some other business and endeavor. Before the word was even coined, he had thoughts of being a serial entrepreneur. In other words, not trying to derive all of his income from one source, because as his business and future will team, there was ups and downs. There was cycles, just like in any economy, and he had to provide for what became a growing and larger family for his own sake and sanctity.
I love it. So, from what I read, Miss Edwards had a career in real estate, which makes her my pioneer. Prior to their venture into neighborhoods. So, can you give us a little bit about her background and her start in real estate?
Number one, she was born in South Carolina. She came from a pretty large family. She had moved to Wichita Falls, Texas. And she, along with her uncle, began to not only build, not only construct, but be involved in the real estate business in Wichita Falls. She got married. She and had two children herself, a boy and a girl. But again, tragically, her husband, her first husband, dies. And that's along about 1929. We're in the depths of the Depression. She moved and migrated to Oklahoma City. And it was there where she met my grandfather. She had much of sophisticated training. She had gone to school, graduated from high school, was college educated, and numbers in business were a part of her makeup. And so, as I've said otherwise, this was not necessarily a marriage made in heaven, but a marriage of two complementary partners who made each other strong. And without the both of them together, they never would have been able to do what they were able to do.
I love that. So how did they overcome some of the restrictions in the state and become such pioneers?
African Americans in Oklahoma City prior to these times were relegated to a certain geographic portion of Oklahoma City, and they couldn't live beyond that. At first, it was 2nd Street. They couldn't live any farther north than 2nd Street. Then it became 4th Street. But even still, the housing that was available to them was substandard. It was someone else's home that had been built. And there was a need. The population of African Americans was growing in Oklahoma City, and it was kind of like a chokehold and a bottleneck. They saw that need. They thought, what is it that we can do to kind of address it? Mrs. Edwards, my grandmother, having the skill of having been involved in real estate, my grandfather, a hard scrabble person like him, being able to bring together raw materials and things that would be needed in the building and construction. And so they sought out to find some suitable place. Where Edwards Addition exists today in near northeast Oklahoma City was way out in the hinterlands back in the late 20s and 30s. There was no bus service. There were no paved roads out to this place, but they saw it as somewhat of an opportunity. And they found this original, I believe it was some 15 acres of land. And they said this could be used for some housing. But in their wisdom, they knew that they faced pushback from the Oklahoma City City Council and others who may object to, quote, Negroes being involved in this aspect of real estate development. So they asked the owner, a man by the name of C.T. Hassman, if he would submit a subdivision plat to the Oklahoma City Planning Commission prior to the sale and transfer to my grandparents. He agreed. That plat was drawn, that was submitted to the city council. It was approved. The land sale and transfer subsequently happened, and they started about the business of building homes.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit about the obstacle of African Americans getting home loans to purchase these houses.
Way before the word of redlining was, something that was a part of our lexicon, Blacks just weren't given the opportunity. They didn't have the same kind of banking relationships that others had. They found some sources of financing, but one of the bigger breakthroughs in this development happened when my grandparents sought to get Federal Housing Administration, or FHA, financing underwritten for home loans being made for these houses that are being built. It faced a great deal of pushback, not only locally, but nationally. And it wasn't until my grandmother actually went to Washington, D.C., and confronted the individuals who were saying that this could never happen. Blacks wouldn't do this, they wouldn't do that. They don't have the wherewithal, the capacity, the stick-to-itness to be on a loan until its maturity. Well, we know all of that changed with, the confrontation. I'm now here. I'm in front of your face. I'm saying that I'm in the midst of this. These houses are being raised. You can check them out. You can see that they are of good or better quality than any other homes that are being built in the city at the time. And so they were able to get the first FHA financing for a housing division built by Blacks for Blacks in the United States.
That's a great story. That's awesome. And as I read, they also had an impact on the soldiers that were coming back from the war, getting their GI benefits. Am I correct with that as
Yes.
well?
Yeah. A little bit in reference to that. What is Edwards Park? Existed as a park back then. And as soldiers were coming back from the war, it was actually an encampment that was located down on this park. And soldiers were staying in these camps, much like they were not nearly as bad as the camps that they had in war, but certainly they were not permanent structures. And it was through this, some of those soldiers then became residents, owners, and occupants of the houses that were being built surrounding Edwards Park.
That's an awesome, amazing story. Like, this is like blowing me away. And I love the history of it, just to understand that it was an integral part of Black home ownership and, taking care of men who have fought for us in our country. And I think that is amazing. So now let's move on and discuss about the hospital and its significance and what motivated it. And talk a little bit about the national recognition for the first interracial staff that your grandparents initiated.
My grandmother became seriously ill. They didn't necessarily know what all was wrong with her. But again, 1945, we are still dealing in very much in segregated society here in Oklahoma City. And the only hospital beds available for African Americans were the basement wards. And certainly they did not provide or afford themselves the best care of the hospital. And as you read, the doctor said, Mr. Edwards, your wife is sick. If she is going to get better, she needs to be in a place that can provide first-rate service to them. And so my grandfather, without hesitation, got her on a plane. They went to Rochester, Minnesota, to the Mayo Clinic, a renowned facility then and now, for her treatment and care. And as she had the operation, as she got better, they determined that everyone necessarily back home did not have the same opportunity that the Edwards had. They were, fortunate to have the means and access to these things that they could, fly and, get the service. But their other colleagues and friends and whatnot, they didn't have that. And so they wanted to do something that would address the need for adequate service being made available in Oklahoma City. They spent well over $400,000 of their own money in the, from 46 to 48. And that would estimate to be well over $4 million today. This is a postcard that dates itself to the late 1940s. And it was a beautiful beige brick hospital that sat where Northeast 16 and Interstate 35 are today. It represented the first integrated staff in the nation, they say, of hospital workers. So white doctors joined black doctors. Black doctors, did their training. Some of them that were already here, like Dr. Morgan, like Dr. Findley, and others, had staff at the hospital, and they operated there themselves. It is the site of my birth. I was born there in the early 50s, and many others of my friends and family and colleagues were born and or treated there.
Okay, this literally brings tears to my eyes. Like I was like holding them back as you were speaking, because it's one thing to empower yourself and build community, but it's another thing to me to reach back and help others. So that is completely amazing. And I am blown away. And I know that the care of many African Americans were bettered by this hospital. And I am like, I just want to bow down to your grandparents and hug them so hard. Right?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the comment.
We're going to go back a little bit and see if you have any more details about the issue when they went to Washington. I think when you put up that picture of that hospital, it kind of jarred me to think maybe he has a little bit more detail about, it's great to talk about what happens in Oklahoma City, but when your grandparents taking things to a national level is, it's a bigger impact to the world. So do you have any more details about what happened in Washington, how they got the word across, and how they got victory there in at the nation's capital?
Well, I don't know all the details. Obviously, I wasn't born at the time. The stories that are told, we are folks based upon oral tradition. We don't, some is written, but not each and every detail that is the life. My grandparents themselves were not solitary soldiers. They were helped and aided by others in this community. And one person that comes readily to mind is the large persona of Mr. Roscoe Dungy, the longtime editor of the Black Dispatch, the longtime civil rights advocate, the longtime, well-connected person throughout this nation. And he was instrumental in getting some means of access. And as my grandmother actually appeared at this office in Washington, D.C., it kind of caught the administrator by surprise, because who, on average is knocking on my door, asking or soliciting these things. But they were not going to be deterred. And if it didn't happen in that way, it was going to happen in another way. They were, just very crafty in the things that they were doing. And when this FHA funding was being sought, housing and construction and completion and sales were already taking place in Oklahoma City. It was this FHA financing that would fuel or bring it to a higher level. But where the real happening was back in Oklahoma City. Because that's where their foot was on the pedal, and they are trying to do other things. When they started building houses, they needed a source of lumber and timber. Now they could buy it from someone else, or they could set up and see about cutting the middleman out and being a wholesaler and retailer themselves. So one of the other businesses that they started was the Edwards Lumber Company. You read about the strip malls that we have now. My grandparents were very cognizant of the fact that where are people, you need schools, you need places of worship, you need other retail sort of things. So they built them a shopping mall down there. It included a sundry store, a convenience store, cleaners, an insurance company, a barbershop, the kind of necessities that any of us would need. Not that it was, 100% complete, but it had some of these other things that people would need on a everyday and ongoing basis.
I love that. Okay, so there's a Kent Ruth article, and it gave attention to your grandparents' beliefs, skills, training, and opportunities, as well as their belief in community and of people working together. So I want to talk a little bit about their philosophy and the values that are part of their legacy, and maybe what they filtered down throughout their family.
Family was very important to them, but family as a bigger means of what this community is and means. The residents of Edwards Addition were some of the leading teachers, doctors, medical professionals, government workers, and the like. And so for African Americans, it was certainly a middle income community. And as such, it benefited from the existence, because if maybe there was a problem with my child who was in school, I didn't have to go very far to look to where that teacher was to be able to figure out, what was going on. If I had a need for some medical service or the like, chances are that that person might live in my community or neighborhood. My grandparents wanted everybody to be as enlightened and as fully protected as anybody else, and they supported various causes as far as the development of the community was concerned, and the aspects of those things that made it better. They were big believers in education being a key to growth, success, and achievement. And so they championed those causes.
I love that. It is just a part of the African American story, that level of community. I grew up on the East Side, and my mom knew the principal very well. She knew every teacher in our classrooms. They lived in our community, and it meant a lot. I think that those kind of communities are what's lacking in America sometimes. The camaraderie, where everyone is raising kids as a village, and you grow together as a community. I love that. So are there any other details about your grandparents that you would like to share with the real estate community and their impact in Oklahoma City? I'm just going to leave the floor open to you to talk as much as you'd like.
In 2016, I was fortunate to take 2 trips. The first trip was to northern Mississippi, to Panola County. And this is where my grandparents, his siblings, and several other related Edwards family moved to Oklahoma. We went there in search of where we came from. And we were able to find a group of my cousins, the original plantation where my grandparents toiled in the field. We were able to find and locate the gravesite and headstone of the last enslaver of my foreparents. This gentleman's name was William Edwards. He dies in 1858, and his headstone was laying down. We had to dig it up, dig it out, and uncover it. And one would ask, why, James and Myra, would you dig up and uncover that headstone of this enslaver of yours? And my answer was, because it is a part of my history, and I want to know as much of it as I possibly can. He's just one part of it. Later that year, in 2016, I and 3 of my cousins traveled to Accra, Ghana, in West Africa. We were so very fortunate to have made a DNA connect with a very elderly woman who lived in Elmina Island, which is the where one of the slave councils are located in Ghana. And she was a DNA match to all of us, but it was a phenomenal, very life-changing, emotional trip for I and my cousins. And we are still in and on a journey to figure out more of our history.
I think that is beautiful. I love, love, love the story of you and your family going all the way back to Ghana. Me and my family have taken that plight. We have gone all the way back to find the last enslaved person. And but we haven't gone all the way back to the motherland. I'm chasing you, okay, on that one.
Okay, all right, all right.
I want to just stop real quick and just encourage everyone to go out and look up some information about your family. I think it was so easy for me to find. I just went and Googled you guys really quick and found out tons of businesses, viable businesses that your grandparents opened, and they really had an intricate part in the African-American community of Oklahoma City becoming, viable and functional, and gave us some easy living, because it wasn't always easy for us. And so anything that could make it just an easier way to have community, I think your grandparents had a part in that in some way, shape, or form. And I am just so grateful to them. I'm so grateful to you for just harnessing their legacy and having enough information to talk about it. I think that is amazing. And my hat's off to you. I hope that this conversation continues off camera. I think the benefit for me through these interviews is I get to meet some amazing people who I could learn a little bit from. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Is there any last thoughts that you'd like to say?
It's always a pleasure for me to talk about my past, my forerunners, that my grandparents that I learned a great deal from. And, as we've got to be learning something new every day to add to our lexicon. And so I wish you good praises to you, yourself, your membership, and the others. And if we can ever be of help, service to you, please don't hesitate to give us a call.